All right, so The Black Phone, which was written by Stephen King Jr., Joe
Mini
Hill.
King.
This is based on a short story that he wrote, which I didn't know until pretty recently, until like maybe the last month or two, because I had heard about this being adapted or being made, and I had no idea it was an adaptation of a Joe Hill thing, but probably because it was like one of a short story in a collected works, so it wasn't a title I was familiar with. And this is brought to us by director Scott Derrickson, who I've heard a lot of people talking about, and they're like, oh, he directed Sinister, and he directed The Exorcism of Emily Rose. But I don't ever hear them mention Deliver Us from Evil, one, with Eric Bana. But another one that I personally love, and I know a lot of people don't care for, Hellraiser Inferno. Just wanted to bring it up real quick because I think that movie rules. And I think the Hellraiser franchise as a whole is vastly underappreciated. But, you obviously can go back and look at any of those discussions or reviews if you'd like my full thoughts on them. But I think it's a cool franchise. And Hellraiser Inferno is my favorite Hellraiser film. So, yeah, Scott Derrickson. And of course, he made Doctor Strange and The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves and whatever.
Hellraiser
But
Inferno.
he was supposed to do Doctor Strange too. And I don't know what happened there. Creative differences, I think. And so he went off and he did this. What about Hellraiser Inferno?
It's the detective story one.
Yeah, I'm just super into that film and just wanted to give it a little shout out here since we're talking about Derrickson. So anyway, moving on from that. So this story is about a young boy and his sister, Finney and Gwen, and it is set in 1978 in
Denver, Colorado.
Oh yeah, that's right, Colorado, right?
The Rocky Mountains.
They talk about Boulder and whatnot.
Yeah.
And there's this guy that's going around town kidnapping kids that they call the Grabber. Of course, Finney gets grabbed and taken into this guy's basement. And down there is a
Black Phone.
Black Phone, the title.
The title.
Titular character of the film is a inanimate object. And he starts to receive phone calls from other children.
Yes.
So it's weird because I watched some reviews on this and people were like, well, I went into this not really knowing like what it was about. I watched the trailer, but I don't want to say anything because like what this is really about I thought was really cool and this and that. And I watched the whole movie and I'm like, wait a minute. But they reveal who the kids are in the trailer.
Yeah.
Like everyone knew that's what they were.
Right.
So I'm super confused by all the reviews I watched. Maybe they saw a different trailer, but
Maybe.
that I've seen the
only
trailer like 7 times,
Yeah.
and it always reveals who those kids are. So
Right.
I just don't understand that. Anyways, moving on from that. So this has Ethan Hawke is the grabber. The little girl Gwen. The only thing I've ever seen her in outside of this is Ant-Man and the Wasp. She plays Young Hope in the flashbacks. And then James Ransone plays a character in this who's Eddie Kasparek from It Chapter 2. And I've seen him in a ton of things. He's actually in Sinister 2, which is probably the connection here to this film, even though Derrickson didn't direct that one. I'm sure he had, an executive producing or something within it. But overall, I'm going to let her go first because I already know her thoughts on the film. Because this shit is getting a lot of praise. It has a 7.4 on IMDb currently, and almost everyone I have heard from has loved the film, and that rating is higher than Hereditary currently, which is pretty insane.
Yeah. Well, I think it's warranted all the praise. I really love the film. I mean, I'm a big fan of horror movies and stories with children as the main cast. I think that there's a lot to explore with childhood trauma and bullying, and I think the film does a great job like discussing those issues. But I thought that the atmosphere was really wonderful. The performances from everybody I thought were fantastic. The little girl Gwen in particular, there's a scene that happens pretty early on in the movie that I just thought like it really hit me emotionally, and I thought she did a just phenomenal job with it. And then Ethan Hawke is terrifying, which is really cool because his character wears a mask for basically most of the movie, so he's really only acting with his voice and his body and eyes. His physicality was wonderful. It was really freaky, and I mean I liked all the like jump scares and everything.
Remote.
And I thought it was great.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I will say that I think, okay, first off, Gwen is the highlight of the film for me for sure. And Ethan Hawke is also great as well. Those are the two characters that definitely, of course, I prefer Gwen as a person. She's a sweet little girl, and the grabber is a horrible, horrendous piece of shit that murders children. Okay. I will say in the very beginning of the movie, I was pretty nervous because I thought that the acting from the kids in the very opening was not good. And I was like, oh shit. Like, are we going to have a problem here? And it wasn't until Gwen had her crying scene, which really won me over on the acting for her specifically. And there is some rough delivered dialogue in here, especially from some of the kids on the phone.
Oh wow!
Like
I did not feel that.
There's like this badass kid that plays pinball. I thought every line out of his mouth was horrid, and I thought it was delivered insanely poor. And it actually was taking me out of the film the whole time. I was like, Jesus Christ, I really hate this kid's performance right now.
Wow, yeah.
So that really took me out of the film. Just some of the conversations on the phone and where they head. I think that there's a fantastic film here as far as like the potential of it, and I think that it definitely lands a good amount of it. I'm still more on the positive side than I am on the negative side, and I do feel like I'm going to be somewhat in the minority on not praising the hell out of this movie, because I definitely am not negative towards it, but I just don't think it's as great as everyone seems to think it is. Which is, of course, it doesn't really matter. It's just my opinion. But I feel like there's a lot of things here. There's a lot of like threads being pulled that just never get fully developed. I feel like a lot of the relationships that are formed with the kids on the phone and all that are so short-lived, and that we don't really spend any time getting to know any of that. There's a lot of like supernatural elements here, and while I'm okay with them being kind of just there and unexplained, and there's connections to, generations and stuff like that, I just felt like I wish I could have gotten more out of those. Like Gwen's role in particular, I don't feel like it really went anywhere exactly. It didn't really amount to anything in the end. And I really wish there would have been much more of like, not only just an emotional impact, but just kind of a payoff with it. And that actually kind of just was like, oh, well, I guess that's that then. Like, and I can't talk spoilers currently because, we're not going to do that here. But it's just like, I felt like we're going somewhere with things. And that there's a lot of emotional things being set up with characters. And then there's a whole like side character that's related to somebody. And I felt like that didn't go anywhere, and it really wasn't fleshed out at all. And it was like, okay, so they're just kind of there. and then they're kind of not, and then that's that. And I was like, okay, like who's, I wanted to know so much more about everything, and it felt like it was taking on too much. That it was like this child abduction film. It was also this supernatural film. It was also this coming of age film. It was also this like, overcoming your fears and standing up for what you want. And, it was like so many things wrapped in one. And I was like, I wish we could just focus on like one or two of these and really hammer them home. As opposed to really just kind of getting bite-sized bits of all of these things, so that when the end comes, I don't feel like I got enough from any one of them to feel like I was fully satisfied with the emotional climax, and the dad character and all of what was happening there. I didn't feel like it got what it wanted in the end for the message of that. Like, I didn't feel like the connection to that I would have liked to, because I feel like there's a missing part there as well. So there's just a lot of like setup, and it's very intriguing. And then they're like capped, and it feels like there's no middle to them. And then as far as like Ethan Hawke's grabber character, this is another thing. It's like, it's fine. It's vague. It's just kind of like, he is what he is. He's evil. That is. But I don't know. They feel like they're setting up so much emotional weight and connection to characters. And there's these big moments where people are like hugging and fist bumping and having these things. And I just wish I knew someone more. I wish I got to spend more time with someone. I wish we wouldn't have taken on so many characters. I wish that maybe he only had one or two kids on the phone that maybe we spent a little more time with to understand why they had a relationship, to understand why they would know these things about him, to understand why they'd be able to encourage him in these ways and whatever. Right? If you had like an It chapter 1 kind of thing where you set up the friendships and everyone knows each other, and then in the next movie he's taking something from all of them and putting it together as this cohesive, overcoming this and that, I would have been like, oh hell yeah, like this is so, this has such an incredible payoff. But I felt that lacking, but not so much that I didn't enjoy myself. Like, it was still a well-made film. It still had good moments. It had a very effective jump moment that I think got almost everybody in the theater. All that stuff, and the performances from Ethan Hawke and the girl who plays Gwen specifically are great. And Finn's fine. Finney's fine. I liked him. I didn't absolutely love him or anything, but I think he was adequate enough for the role. I just wanted to connect more to anything, and it's bit off more than it could chew for me.
I didn't feel like that. I mean, you mentioned like it, has the supernatural and the child abduction and like all these different things, and I think that the bites that they took out of each of those elements actually fit really well together. Of course, like if it was something like an It Chapter 2 where we went more in depth with the children that had been previously abducted, that would have been amazing. But I also like that they're kind of kept, like, we don't know exactly what happens with them and the grabber.
Nope.
And I feel like that...
I would have liked to.
I mean, I would have liked it, but I also think it works really well the way that it plays out, because it's like, so many kids get abducted, and like for him to kind of just get thrown into this situation and have these little threads that he can sort of piece together himself and bring, also his own personality and talents and everything to kind of bind it all together. I like that. I like that he's the glue that's holding, and every little clue and discovered, bit of information that people who had, been there previously pass on to him through the phone.
Sure, and there's a connection to the phone with another big character of the movie, right?
Right.
At least that's what's suggested and outright said by this character. But that goes where? And what do we learn from that? And where's the payoff to that? And where do we find out that this happened to this person too or something? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, there's so many things set up, and then it's like over and you're like, wait. And then there's like all of his escape tactics, right? Because he's trying to get out, right? I mean, obviously. And these kids on the phone are helping. And it's like there's moments where something happens and the room changes in a way. And I'm like, does the grabber not notice this is altered?
So I think I mean, for some of those things that are changed, like he does hide, like.
But you would notice this thing was missing.
But it's also, whenever we see the grabber coming, like he really, I mean, I don't, I feel like giving spoilers in some ways, but he's not like deep in the room with Finn.
But he has been.
But
right?
But we never see that at all. He like actually only comes, and that's also like, again, without giving spoilers, there's a reason why he, I think, is not interacting more in the room with Finn, because there's rules that he wants him to follow, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't like, there's an area where there's a toilet, for example, that is out of view of where the door is, and there's other areas that are out of view of where the door is.
But this area in which I'm talking about is in plain sight, right when you walk in. So to me, the fact that this has been altered and is missing a key piece all of a sudden.
I don't think it is in view though. Like the way I'm remembering the scene, because it's hard because I think we're talking without trying to give anything away.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if I'm thinking of the same thing that you are. But
regardless, for me, it's just a lot of setup that's missing the middle, missing the connection. It's left too vague in so many areas, and it's like asking me to fill in so many blanks. Just taking the supernatural elements alone, because the phone is not the only supernatural element here, and that other supernatural element has a connection to something from the past as well. But that's never explored, really. And it's just, that's what I'm saying. There's so many things set up in this film. And here's the thing. This is what I think is interesting to me about that. Typically, when we have a book adaptation, I would watch this movie and I would say, okay, they have a limited runtime. So they tried to cram everything from the book into the film. And so now we're left with all of these, plot threads that have not been tied up, right? Because they just ran out of time. That is not what happened here. Okay, this is the exact opposite. This is a short story. And I've listened to people talk about it. They're like, oh, they had to add a lot in order to make this a feature-length film. The story is short enough that it would only make like for a short film. So they added all of this stuff. This isn't necessary for them to add all of this stuff. So it's weird to me because when I watch an adaptation, I would expect this to happen from a Stephen King novel that's 1,000 pages long. And it's like, well, we can't address everything, but we tried. No, they added all of this stuff, but then didn't actually follow through with a lot of it. So that's where I'm kind of like, you guys should have just maybe focused a little bit more on him in the room with the phone. Honestly, as much as I love Gwen, and she is my favorite character in the film, I am not sure how necessary she is to the film.
I don't agree. I think that she has a really necessary role. I think that there's a major thing that she does that wouldn't have happened without her.
We'll have to talk about it after because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Because it's like one of the big things that happens. So yeah, we can talk about it after.
Yeah, we will.
And maybe we can do a spoiler discussion at some point. But I thought she was necessary, and
let's just talk spoilers. Let's do it. So spoilers from here. We'll just talk about them real quick.
Well,
what's the big thing? Spoilers. So go away if you haven't seen it.
Is that Finn? So he escapes, right? But they wouldn't have found the second house where all the bodies were that she was seeing in her visions without her being there and like showing them where it is.
100% untrue.
He leaves the other house.
No.
Like, why would they think to look in the house across the street?
Stop, because he owns it.
Okay, but...
And because they would eventually go over there. Like, once the lease lapses and no one pays it, They're going to repossess it. They're going to go in there. There's fucking mounds in the basement where they're going to find there's a basement because it's the homeowners that come to fucking claim the house. They know the blueprints. They know there's a basement. They're going to find it, and they're going to find fucking bodies down there. It's going to be across the street from the killer's house. Pretty easy to figure out who's who. I'm not saying that she doesn't lead them to the bodies. They would have found the bodies. This is what I'm saying. This is why him owning the house, I'm like...
But, okay, we don't know...
So there's literally no point to Gwen.
But that's the thing, though, and I know it's like, I'm kind of like, there's... I feel like there's not... It's said that he owns the house, but it's like, does he own it in his name?
Doesn't
or like,
matter.
is it... And I mean, but
there's
still,
kids buried in the basement across the street.
There, and I get
they know who it is.
They know, yeah. So you're right. They probably would have found it eventually. So maybe it's not like entirely only her, but I do think that because of how Gwen and Finn's relationship is, it presented in the movie, that it is like both of them are, solving this mystery and,
had she had
visions, justice.
Had she had visions of where the kids' bodies were buried, and it was like in an undisclosed area, which they would have never found the kids, and like putting those thoughts to rest and letting those kids' bodies be found for the parents and all that, that would have been better. Or even if like maybe one of them was still alive and she saved them, and it was like they were gonna die if she never came and found them. They were in some kind of like saw trap room where like, he's closed the door and forgotten about them kind of thing, then that would have had a much more a bigger payoff for that. It's just the house is across the street. It's in his name. I think really the point of Gwen is to fill some runtime and also to be a like not a MacGuffin, but like a total red herring, right? It's like, you think, even though this isn't technically a red herring because he's not the villain or anything, but you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a sleight of hand or misdirect. That's what I'm trying to think of. That she's going to come in with the cops and save the day. And they're coming in the house, it's like Saw 2 or something, right? Where the people are coming into the house, you think they're about to save the day, and then they find out it's not, we're in the wrong house.
Yeah.
Where the fuck are they? So I think it's more of just you're waiting for her to come and save the day. And realistically, the film is about Finney saving himself.
Yes.
Which I like. I like that he saves himself. But I don't know. Just having it be a misdirect for me, because I do find, as I said, if she would have just led them to the bodies that they would never have found otherwise, fine. But I just think they 100% would have found the bodies regardless. So her inclusion is kind of pointless in that way. But I love her, and I wish I would have said this in my spoiler-free part, but it doesn't really matter. She is the Ricky of Sleepaway Camp in this film. Yeah, she has some
really funny, like,
she's got a potty mouth
lines, yeah,
and she likes to fight.
It's great.
And she goes after kids and even starts cussing at Jesus and everything. So
cusses at some cops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fart knockers.
You fucking fart knockers. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that I think that she is necessary, because I think that, like, as much as the film is definitely about Finney, like, saving himself, standing up for himself, and, like, beating this, I think that their relationship in the beginning and their home life and everything is super important to, like, his growth as a person. Because, like, this is where he's coming from, already an abusive household where they've lost their mom and their father's an alcoholic, and, he has to watch him beat his sister, and, like, he's, feels like he can't do anything, but he hates him for it. And then, like, he goes through this horrible experience. And although, of course, he should never have had to go through it, he comes out on the other side, now, like, able to kind of obviously stand up for himself and isn't afraid of the same things that he used to be afraid of.
But I would have liked to have seen him stand up for himself after this.
Sure.
I would have liked to have seen him step up to his father.
But, like, that's...
Your fucking apology isn't good enough.
Yeah, but, I mean, like, it's... The relationship with their dad, obviously he's a shitty father, but he's, an alcoholic and depressed from his wife's death. I'm not making excuses for him at all, but in some way he does obviously love his kids. Like, he is happy that Finney is back. Like, and he does have that moment where he's, like, trying to repent. And I like that they don't really acknowledge it, you know? Like, they don't tell him to fuck off. They just kind of sit there and, like, hold each other.
Right, they don't
and
forgive
he's
him
just,
outright.
he's just, you know, on his knees, like, crying. And I like that because it's, like, you know, obviously just saying you're sorry and, like, asking for forgiveness isn't enough. Like, he's going to have to go forward into the future and, you know, actually be a better dad.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay that it ended that way. And, you know, like, for whenever he goes back to school at the very end, everybody's looking at him and talking to him. And then he has just kind of a nice moment where he tells the girl that he's got a crush on, you know, to call him Finn instead of Finney.
Which I guess is him coming into his own and not being called, like, a kid's name anymore.
Yeah, like, Finney was probably, you know, childish and, like, it was kind of belittling, probably, is what he felt, so.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I just, like, we set up this whole supernatural element with Gwen, who has the ability to, you know, she has this, like, foresight or whatever the hell she has, some ability to see in her dreams. What's that? Precognition. Precognition is seeing it before it happens. She seems to be seeing it not only, like, as it's happening or once it's happened, or, like, but she's also seeing, like,
she gets, like, messages. She doesn't quite see it, like, exactly like it's happening. But I think that her setup, so, like, that we get the connection that she's got this ability. The dad is afraid of it because the mom kills herself after, you know, having all these visions and hearing messages. And then Finney's the only one we find out from the kids that actually ever heard the phone ring. So I think that that's a good connection because it's like, okay, we can see it's genetic.
Why is the phone down there?
I mean, you're right. Like, I do have a question about that, but
Ethan Hawke's character says that he hears it ringing sometimes too, but when he picks up, there's no one there. So he has enough ability to hear it ring. But he also said that that phone hasn't worked since he was a kid. Was he a kid trapped in that basement? Was he also somebody who, you know, I don't know, fucking what? I don't know. Like, what's mean, that phone even doing down there?
It's vague. Like, we don't get that explanation at all. But I think, you know, the grabber is, like, so clearly to me, at least, like, represents abusive parents. Like, he wants Finney to play his game. Like, he wants him to act out and, like, go, like, you know, make mistakes that he didn't even know were supposed to be mistakes, so to speak. Which is very, like, you know, an abusive narcissistic parent. Like, you say something or you do something that they've already made in their mind is like, once you do this, then now I'm gonna, like, wail on you or, you know, be a bitch to you or whatever. And the mask changes that he has throughout, like, he clearly has these, like, different split personalities too. I mean, he even says at one point when Finney's like, are you gonna kill me, or like something about killing kids or whatever, and he's like, that wasn't me, I didn't do that.
Right, it's split.
You know? So it does make me think that he probably was a product of some type of abuse.
Right.
And is, you know, like, going through this to, you know, recreate the scenario in which he was abused and now he's on the other side. We don't get any information from that, and I kind of like it that way, but like you were saying in the beginning, if it was made into, like, a two-part film, or a two-film, you know, story where we got this, like, really in-depth, like, look into all these kids, I would have been really into that, of course. Like, because
we don't even need a second film. We just maybe need 30 more minutes or less.
Or that. But I mean,
kids on the phone and less setup, and, like, the whole Gwen thing, in addition to the black phone and all of that, is a lot. But what I thought was happening here, what I thought was going on, was that they all had gifts. I thought that Gwen had her gift from her mom. I thought that Finn had his gift that his dad also had, but was suppressing it with alcohol. And was just like, no, I don't want to hear my gifts. You know, and I thought that maybe he was going to reveal that he also had it and was going to be able to like contact his son or something once he stopped drinking and got off the bottle or something like that. And I thought that Ethan Hawke's character liked him because he reminded of him because he was like him when he was a kid. And, you know, he's taken on the personalities of all the kids that he was on the phone with. Right? Like I was writing this whole different fucking book or movie in my head while I was watching. I was trying to figure out the big twists or the big connections. So like, why do we have this character? Why is this character doing this? Why is this character saying this? And so I was like, okay, it's probably connected through this. And, you know, and he was drawn to him. And then once he was down there, he's picking up the phone and he's like, oh shit, he's also a person like me. And that kid is taking on the personalities of the kids that he's talking to because he's able to, you know, defeat the grabber by learning, like, you know, there's the thing in the floor that you can take out and putting, you know, the grate down there. And the thing I was referring to was the fucking grate on the you know, the window.
Yeah.
Which is right inside the door when you look up to the right. You walk in, there's the grate with the fucking you know, window, and he pulls that down, and then he just like throws it in a hole, and the grabber comes in and doesn't notice that grate's missing. Bullshit.
I don't know if it's bullshit though, because he feels like
No way.
He feels so like chaotic and manic that like I don't know if he would 100% notice it, because like
I just don't buy that.
I mean, he's,
But
you know,
that's
I
fine.
don't know, because no other kid has escaped, right? Like nobody else has gotten
What you're
out
telling
to the
me
point
though,
where
like
Finney is. So
the problem for me is like there's too many things to ignore. There's like this guy's not keeping an eye on anything. He's breaking through the wall. He's digging through the floor. He's pulling shit off the thing. The guy comes into the room and he's watching him sleep. He leaves carpets in there, and the kid lays down carpet in the hallway, and he doesn't go check that. He doesn't notice that there's a huge hole in the floor. Like, he's not hiding it with a Rita Hayworth poster, right? Like, he's hiding it with an obvious carpet that's fucking laid across the ground. Why would that kid put that there? Like, I don't know. It's just, it asks so much from the audience of being like, you know, this killer isn't going to actually, I don't know, look around the room to see anything has, you know, been changed or altered. Regardless, I just thought even maybe the phone wasn't even like real and the guy was upstairs talking to him, or like the kids were, you know, I don't know. I just thought there was going to be so much more to it, and there's really not. There's really just, it is, for as much as goings on, it's a pretty simple, straightforward movie, right? There is no twist, really, to me. Like, the only real twist is the idiot brother is living in the house with him, but they reveal that in, like, a minute after meeting him, and it's like, I get you're an idiot, but you're smart enough to put together an entire collage of events to track it down to a specific area, which the cops agree that is it. So he's smart enough to understand that this killer's in this area and he's on the lookout for him, and he can't figure out that it's his brother that's in the house bringing kids down into the basement. That's another thing that they're asking me. And then when he comes down, yeah, he's kind of simple. He's like, oh, you want to know how I figured this out? Like,
I mean,
he's kind of being
high
portrayed
on coke all the time too. Like, that's also another thing. Like, I feel like him figuring it out and being like, here's the, like, you know, the red yarn like board that I've made is just him being like super coked out.
Sure, and he misses it right under his nose, I guess. But that's not, it's just, if it was that, then fine. But it's also the other 17 things I said, right? And I just think that if we had built the relationship up with the badass kid with the unisex name, Robin. So we kind of got a little bit of him, right? Like, we got to see him beat up a bully, and we got to see him threaten a friend, but we never saw their friendship. Like, we saw that he stuck up for him, but we saw nothing else of their friendship. No interactions between them. Why weren't they friends for like 10 minutes, right? Why wasn't he, and then the relationship he has with the baseball kid. It's just him walking past him and being like, your arm's mint, right?
Yeah, but I think
and
that
he just keeps saying it on the phone,
Finney,
your arm's mint, your arm's mint, your arm's mint.
I think that for
because
Finney,
that's the only conversation they ever have.
Yes, but it works though, because in the end, like, I really like that payoff of him, like, ending with his arms mint, and then he, like, you know, strangles him and, like, whatever. But also, I would say that we see that Finney is this really bullied, isolated kid.
Yeah.
So those brief moments of interaction, like, with his, you know, he wants to get this kid out at the baseball game, and he doesn't, and he's like, oh man, like, I want that camaraderie when he sees the other team, like, congratulating and cheering, and then to have him come up and be like, hey, like, you know, we played well, like, instead of being an asshole to him, that's a shining moment for him. And the same thing with Robin, where, you know, like, he sticks up for him with these bullies, and then is like, hey, can you help me with this? And I think that those moments, like, even though, like, sure, like, seeing more of him with Robin, but I feel like we already get that he means a lot to him because he's, like, his only friend. And
I didn't even know they were friends. I just thought he was sticking
friends,
up for him.
But it's also like, you know,
we
he
never
goes
see
home,
them together. Your friends hang out with you.
He goes home to take care and watch over his alcoholic dad, and to keep an eye on his sister whenever he's there with her, even though he can't do anything.
They can't have a fucking, like, 2-minute scene hanging out.
No, I'm not saying that couldn't have been included. I'm just saying that for what is given in the film, I don't think that it's a stretch to see, like, okay, there's the connection with that, there's the connection with that. There was only really one kid that is mentioned that, you know, also says that he was, like, invisible most of his life, that he didn't have an interaction with. And that kid on the phone has the most limited conversation, I feel like, with him. Even the pinball, like, metalhead, like, he sees him, like, you know, beat somebody up, and so he has an interaction. Obviously, that's not a good one. But I think that the other two, like, it makes sense why they're helping him, and, you know, I just saw it there is all. I'm not disagreeing. I think that there could have been more with those interactions, and I would have loved that, but
would have liked to have seen him, like, I don't know, have a conversation with them, get something more out of them than them just giving him one piece of the puzzle on how to get out of there.
But again, it's also like what I said earlier, like, these kids, you know, like, it's all these, like, kids in the same school district or, like, neighborhood that are being kidnapped and taken, that it's a, you know, he doesn't know all of them super, super well. Aside from Robin would be the only one that I would think that he would actually have more information about. Like, all these other ones, it's kind of just like, yeah, these are just other kids that got abducted. Right. And he's going to be one in a long, you know, a long list kind of a thing. Like, that's the feeling that I got. And he, you know, he is fighting that, obviously, the whole movie, because he, of course, doesn't want to die down there.
And them forgetting their name and nothing else also seems like a super weird inclusion.
I mean,
like, oh, if you say so, that's my name. But anyways, here's all the other information and everything else I remember. Well, I just forget my name and that's it. But then the kid says his name and then they're like, oh yeah, that's me. And it's like, what's the point of that?
Well, I think it's kind of like, you know, like all those missing persons, all missing children posters, like, people remember them, like, right when they're missing, and then slowly, because there's so many of them, they kind of just eventually, you know, unless you're the family and friends of that person, you forget about them. Mm-hmm. I felt like it was kind of like that, right? Like, they're forgetting their identities in the same way that, like, first they were remembered, you know, because they're the most recent missing kid, and then another one comes along, and then the town's moving on to that one, and it's kind of like, really, the children are the only ones that are keeping maybe as much track of who's going missing, because they're their classmates and friends and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, just an idea.
Sure. Sounds good. I think that's it. I mean, yeah. I think I'm over it. I just, I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more confused I get, and the more, like, I feel like things are just not fully fleshed out and realized, and they just took on too much, and it feels like we're missing 20 minutes of the movie or something. Right? Yeah. So, overall, I'm disappointed. For sure. I expected this to crack my top 10 of the year, and I don't think it would make the top 10. just from what I know is probably, coming out and whatever. It might make the top 10 currently, but there ain't much in there. But, I can name 5 movies or more this year in the horror genre that I definitely liked more. So, not my number one, but it doesn't have to be. A film doesn't have to be your favorite thing ever to be good or enjoyable. I enjoyed plenty of it, mostly Gwen and Ethan Hawke's Grabber. But yeah, that's that. That's that. I hope that, if you're still here, you've seen the movie, so you already have your opinion, and we can talk about it in the comments. But yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about this, and that's the fun of the channel, is that we just kind of get to sit down and have a conversation like we would have. That's why I don't say anything until we get in front of the camera. Because what's the point? Am I going to spend 10 minutes with you in fucking front of the theater and then come back here and say the shit again? I'd rather just air it out and then have you be like, no, you're wrong, cuz. And I'm like, no, you're wrong, cuz. Not cousin.
Cuz, like...
Do you think, cuz... Don't do your thing,
Don't do your thing, cuz.
Do your thing if she looks like Alexandra Daddario. No? Okay. Bye.